I would appraise this book actually at about $40,000.
Let me tell you, you are lucky.
You probably saved my job.
Well, you can thank me with some chocolate or something.
For nearly a decade, one woman walked into the world-famous gold and silver pawn shop and did something almost nobody else on that show could do. She held a piece of paper that looked like nothing, and in under 2 minutes, she could tell you if it was worth $400 or $400,000. No shouting, no dramatic music cues needed, just quiet, total certainty. Her name is Rebecca Romney, and while millions of people watch her on Pawn Stars, almost nobody actually knows her story. Where she came from, how she ended up holding a Shakespeare folio in her hands before she turned 30, why she quietly stepped back from the show that made her famous, and what she has been building ever since. Stick around, because the real story is stranger and honestly more impressive than anything you saw on television. Long before she was the calm, unshakable book expert on a reality show filmed in a Las Vegas pawn shop, Rebecca Romney was just a college student with a serious obsession for language. She studied classical studies and linguistics, the kind of degree that people love to joke has no practical use in the real world. She spent her early 20s buried in ancient texts, dead languages, and the kind of dense academic material most people avoid entirely. Nothing about that path screamed television career, and nothing about it obviously pointed toward the rare book trade either. But it turns out that a mind trained to notice tiny details in centuries-old language is exactly the kind of mind that can spot a forged signature or a doctor title page. She just didn't know it yet. The way she actually entered the rare book world sounds almost like an accident, and in a way it was. In 2007, Bauman Rare Books was opening a new location inside Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas, and they needed someone for the gallery. Rebecca applied, got the job, and stepped into a world she had zero professional experience in. Within a short time, she was no longer just an employee learning the ropes. She was handling material that most people will never get within arm's reach of in their entire lives. Shakespeare folios, early scientific manuscripts, first editions that had survived wars, fires, and centuries of careless owners. It was a crash course unlike any other, and she absorbed it fast. By 2010, just 3 years after walking through the door, she was promoted to manage the gallery itself. That promotion mattered more than it might sound, because it put her directly in Rick Harrison's orbit. Rick had been running gold and silver pawn shops since the late 1980s, and Las Vegas is a smaller world than people think, especially when you're talking about antiques and rare collectibles. The two crossed paths through the local trade, not through some casting agency search. When Pawn Stars needed someone who could speak with real authority about old books, letters, and documents, Rick didn't need an audition process. He already knew exactly who to call. Rebecca made her first appearance on the show in its 4th season, which aired in 2011. From the very first episode, something about her stood out. She wasn't performing shock or excitement for the cameras the way some experts on reality TV tend to. She would pick up a document, examine the paper, the ink, the binding, and just calmly explain what she was seeing and why it mattered. When she delivered a number, whether it was a small disappointment or a genuinely stunning valuation, her tone barely changed. That steadiness became her signature, and it's a big part of why fans nicknamed her the Book Lady and kept asking for more of her on screen. Over the next several years, she became one of the most consistent expert guests the show has ever had, and notably the only recurring female specialist in its lineup. Between 2011 and 2015, she appeared in 19 episodes, examining everything from Civil War-era documents to early scientific texts to literary first editions. One of her most memorable moments involved Chum-Li, who had bought a signed copy of Charles Lindbergh's 1927 memoir for $500, despite the seller having misspelled Lindbergh's own name on the item. Everyone assumed it was worthless, and Chum-Li braced for the fallout. Rebecca stepped in, examined the signature against verified examples, and explained how Lindbergh's own handwriting had shifted over the years as he became more famous. It turned out to be genuine. She valued it at around $1,500, tripling what Chum-Li had paid and saving him from what could have been a very bad day at work. Moments like that are why people loved watching her work. She wasn't just naming a price. She was teaching, in real time, how to actually read an object's history. A watermark, a binding style, the chemical behavior of old ink, the exact type of paper stock used in a particular decade. Little details most viewers never would have noticed became the entire foundation of her verdict. And because she so clearly knew what she was talking about, when she said something was fake, nobody argued with her. So if she was such a fan favorite, why did her appearances start slowing down after 2014? This is the part people love to speculate about. And honestly, the truth is a lot less dramatic than the internet rumors that have circulated over the years. In 2016, Rebecca got married. Her husband, J.P. Romney, is an author and historical researcher, and through him, she became distantly connected to the Romney political family, including Mitt Romney, who ran for president in 2012. It's worth being clear here, because this detail gets exaggerated constantly online. Rebecca has said plainly in interviews that she has never actually met Mitt Romney. The connection is real on paper, through marriage, but it is distant, and she has never treated it as part of her professional identity. What actually changed her schedule was much simpler. She relocated to Philadelphia, closer to her husband's roots, and took on a senior role at Bauman Rare Books headquarters there. Moving away from Las Vegas naturally meant she couldn't be on set as often, since the show films at the actual pawn shop. She didn't vanish, and she was never fired. She simply built her career somewhere else, and popped back in for occasional appearances whenever she was in town, including a memorable episode where she evaluated a Lewis and Clark expedition journal and had to break the disappointing news that library markings had significantly hurt its value. The following year, in 2017, Rebecca and JP co-wrote a book together called Printer's Error, Irreverent Stories from Book History. It's a collection of strange, entertaining, and occasionally scandalous stories from the history of printing and publishing, covering everything from forged editions to bitter copyright battles. The book did well critically and commercially, and it gave Rebecca something a lot of reality television personalities never managed to build: a respected voice in her actual field, completely separate from her screen time. That same period marked the start of one of her most meaningful projects outside the pawn shop. In 2017, alongside fellow bookseller Heather O'Donnell, she co-founded the Honey and Wax Book Collecting Prize. It's an annual award, backed by respected names in the book world, that gives a cash prize to a woman under 30 who has built the most original and thoughtful personal book collection. The idea came from something Rebecca had noticed again and again in her career. Plenty of women loved collecting books, but very few of them were comfortable calling themselves collectors, a label that had quietly become coded as a hobby for older men. The prize wasn't about who owned the most expensive item. It was about vision, curiosity, and the story a collection told. Over the years, it has recognized collectors with wildly different interests, from botanical illustration to military history, and it has become a genuinely respected fixture in the rare book community. In 2019, Rebecca took the biggest professional leap of her career and co-founded her own firm, Type Punch Matrix, based in the Washington, D.C. area, alongside her business partner Brian Cassidy. This wasn't a small side project. It was a full-scale rare book dealership handling serious material, from Shakespeare folios to leaves from the Gutenberg Bible, serving collectors and institutions willing to spend real money on literary history. In a trade that has historically skewed older and male-dominated, Rebecca built a name for herself as someone sharp, direct, and unwilling to just play along with old norms. Even as her business grew, Rebecca never fully disappeared from Pawn Stars either, despite what some corners of the internet have claimed over the years. She made a notable return in a special episode of Pawn Stars Do America, filmed in her new home base of Washington, D.C., where she appraised a pirate-related book and slipped right back in her old rhythm with the crew, cracking jokes with Chumlee and Corey like no time had passed at all. It's worth saying clearly, because so much online chatter has tried to spin her reduced screen time into some kind of scandal. There is no verified evidence of any FBI investigation, any stolen book controversy, or any secret falling out behind the scenes. Those stories exist mostly as speculation on forums and video essays, not as anything ever confirmed by Rebecca, the History Channel, or any law enforcement agency. Her actual explanation, a cross-country move for her marriage and career, is simply less exciting than a conspiracy theory, but it happens to be the one that's actually true. What Rebecca has done since stepping back from constant television appearances is arguably far more interesting than anything a scandal storyline could offer anyway. In 2025, she released a new book called Jane Austen's Bookshelf, and it represents a genuine shift in how she talks about her own field. The book digs into the women writers who directly influenced Jane Austen, names like Frances Burney and Radcliffe and Charlotte Smith, all of whom were massively popular and commercially successful in their own time, and all of whom have been almost completely erased from the literary canon that gets taught today. Rebecca has been candid that she herself didn't know much about these authors for most of her career, despite being a professional rare book dealer. That realization became the engine behind the entire project. She started tracking down original editions of their work, hunting through auctions and estate sales for books that had been dismissed for generations as sentimental or unserious simply because women wrote them. The book received strong reviews from major outlets and sold well. And more importantly, it sparked real conversation about how survival and reprinting rates for historical literature have never been equal between male and female authors. Alongside her writing, Rebecca has continued teaching the next generation of dealers through the Antiquarian Book Seminar, where she's been a regular instructor for years. She doesn't just teach people how to spot a first edition. She's openly discussed the darker side of the trade, too, including historical forgery scandals that fooled respected experts for decades. Because understanding how people get fooled is just as important as knowing how to authenticate something correctly. So what's the real, untold truth about Rebecca for Pawn Stars? It's not some secret scandal or a mysterious disappearance. It's that the calm, quietly confident woman you saw calling out fakes and validating treasures on basic cable television was never just a TV character to begin with. She was, and still is, one of the most respected working rare book dealers in the country. Someone who built an actual company, wrote actual books, created an award that's helped launch other women into a field that historically ignored them, and who is now using her platform to correct the historical record on writers who deserve to be remembered and weren't. Pawn Stars gave Rebecca Romney a national audience, but it turns out the show was never really the whole story. It was just the introduction.